Okay, now let's proceed to the third section, which is the propaganda movement and La Solidaridad. Okay, so in this section, it provides a summary of Rizal's contributions to the propaganda movement that called for reforms from the Spanish colonial government in the Philippines. So in particular, this section explains the principle of assimilation as advocated by the propaganda movement led by the La Solidaridad. Okay, so prior to the arrival of Rizal in Spain, many Filipino students were already studying there, like Pedro Paterno and Gregorio Sanciano, who were both active Filipino nationalists. So I hope you still remember Pedro Paterno and Gregorio Sanciano. And when Rizal arrived in Spain in 1882, there was an atmosphere of activism led mostly by students. And around this time, Spain's government was in disarray because the newly adopted 1876 constitution created a power vacuum. So as political parties tried to consolidate their power and politicians tried to secure their personal agendas, shifting from one political bloc to another became common. And corruption was prevalent, okay, in the Spanish government. So furthermore, a series of government and cabinet organizations followed shortly after every change of party alignment. So in addition, many people in Spain were illiterate because of the lack of primary and secondary schools. And most importantly, the church was still formidable force in almost every aspect of Spanish society. So this was the situation in Spain that Rizal witnessed when he arrived. So he was also welcomed in an atmosphere of liberalism which exposed him to the ideas formerly foreign to him. And this was when he became aware of the concept of Spain and not just a tributary colony. So for Rizal, this meant that Filipinos could be equal to or could be equal with the Spaniards. And shortly after arriving in Barcelona, Spain, Rizal started contributing to the short-lived bilingual newspaper, Diaryong Tagalog. So together with Marcelo H. Del Pilar, yan. So most of Rizal's contributions were focused on the idea of national regeneration of through education. Yan. Likewise, Rizal also contributed to another publications led by Graciano Lopez Haina. So Rizal Haina was the first lead series of protests and writing against injustices of the Spaniards in the Philippines in the newspaper Los Dos Mundos. Later on, Rizal found himself writing side by side with Haina's criticisms against the Spanish colonial regime. So in 1883, Rizal's resentment against the Spaniards intensified when he received a letter from his brother Panciano. So this letter informed him about the new Calamba parish priest, Father Villafranca, who was threatening their father and demanding for advanced rental payments. In 1884, Haina and Rizal delivered speeches at the Exposition de Bellas Artes in Madrid, where two Filipino painters were given recognition. Juan Luna received an award for his Spolarium, and Felix Resurrección Hidalgo for his Vírgenes Cristianas Expuestas al Populacho or Populaco. In their speeches, Haina condemned the abuses of the friars at the Spanish colonial government in the Philippines, whereas Rizal encouraged the Filipino youth to follow in the footsteps of Luna and Hidalgo. So Rizal's speech received various interpretations both from Spain and the Philippines. So in the Philippines, Rizal's speech was considered seditious, and many believed that Rizal could never return to the Philippines again as long as it was colony of the Spain. So, yan. There you have it. The Spolarium and the Virgines Christianas Expuestas al Populacho or Populaco. Yan. So, ang Spolarium, yung ating nakikita sa National Museum. Yan. Ang famous Spolarium ni Juan Luna. Okay. So, it was 1885 that Rizal became more active in contributing to various newspapers. In 1888, Rizal joined an organization composed of Filipino liberals exiled in Spain, the La Solidaridad, and the organization aimed to raise the awareness of Spain on the needs of its colony, the Philippines. So, Galicano Apacible, Rizal's cousin, issued a newspaper on the same name. It was published in Barcelona. Jaina and later on, Del Pilar edited the newspaper, while Rizal was an active and significant contributor. Okay. And yan. It served as principal organ of the reform movement. So most of the articles featured in La Solidaridad talked about the possibility of the Philippines becoming a province of Spain with equal rights before the law and recognition of the freedom of speech and assembly. Yan. So one of Rizal's most important contributions was the letter to the young women of Malolos published on February 22, 1889. It recognized the efforts and the bravery of 20 women from Malolos who wrote a petition letter to the Governor General Valeriano Weyler to allow them to put up a night school where they could study the Spanish language under tutulage of Teodoro Sandico. Okay, so though the petition was initially denied because of the pressure and the influence of the friars, the perseverance of the women of Malolos prevailed. Okay, so Jose Rizal also made a fearless forecast on the future of the Philippines within 100 years in his work, The Philippines a Century Hence. So it analyzes the various causes of the miseries suffered by the Filipino under the Spanish colonizers. So in connection to this, Rizal wrote another essay published in La Solidaridad in Madrid in 1890. It was entitled The Indolence of the Filipino, as a response to the accusations of the Spaniards that the Filipinos were indolent. And Rizal argued that several factors can be identified, such and most can be rooted in the abuses committed by the Spaniards directed to the Filipinos. So, Rizal's outstanding talent and passion for writing, as evidenced by his numerous works, greatly antagonized the friars who were the usual target of his criticisms. And again, after Jaina quit the writing for the group, Plaridel assumed leadership. And there were stories that Rizal was offered the position of editor but rejected it as he thought it might create a rift between the two propagandists or the two propagandistas. Soon, Rizal also stopped writing for the newspaper to dedicate his time in addressing the Calamba agrarian dispute that was further fueled by the eviction of Mercado family in the Dominican lands. So that's section 3.